Hey everybody, and welcome back to Vestanland. In this episode, I do a huge expansion of the central city by placing down a bunch of new buildings and basically doubling the size of the central core that I have been building out in the past couple episodes. A lot of this was similar to just what I've gone through in other episodes with placing buildings and sliding them into position to create wall-to-wall blocks. I also use procedural objects and some sort of splicing together of different buildings to create some cool effects at the corners to make the whole city look a little bit more realistic. I also did some work with intersection marking tool and placing down decals and stuff like that to make the surfaces and intersections and roads look a lot more realistic, which I think was really helpful in terms of getting a better atmosphere at the street level in the city. A lot of these intersection marking tool processes, it's a lot of trial and error to figure out exactly what it would look like, especially since I'm not basing this off of anywhere in the real world. It's not like there's sort of a template I can go off of. So it's really more just trying to figure out what looks best and what gives the right idea of what I'm going for. Also, you can see these paths that I have placed down initially. I use those really just as sort of placeholders to allow myself to make these blocks look a little bit more realistic. And once I'm done placing all the buildings, I will turn the paths invisible and place some cobblestone over them to make them look a little more old, a little more aged. That creates a really cool effect. It allows you to sort of play with the scale of the city a little bit differently. So you have a lot more blocks of buildings, but you don't have to put out too many roads. And it creates a really nice vibe in terms of building an old town similar to a European city, which is kind of what I'm going for. Again, finding buildings that fit into these kind of awkward corner shapes is really important. Those are kind of the most important buildings to place down first, because once those are down, you can sort of place together more traditional buildings around them, which, just really helps to create a more realistic looking streetscape. Again, just adding some small details to the intersections, like these road arrows and stop lines, small things that can make a big difference in terms of adding realism. Also using intersection marking tool to continue these bike lanes through the intersection. I'm making sure to use kind of a standard format for each intersection, sort of as if this city has, it has like a sort of a zoning code type thing that they follow. Just adding some consistency, which is nice. These are the type of things that, when you look at the city from above, it's really important to have those visual things done right, so it ties everything together. Moving on, I just placed down a lot more buildings, a lot more of these corner buildings, adjusting the sort of latitude settings to see exactly what I was working on, using mods to disable some of the props that come with these buildings. Even though they can look nice, it's nice to have sort of a blank canvas to work with. Usually, I sort of laid out the roads with the intention of putting down buildings that sort of followed them as closely as possible. But sometimes it's just easier to, if you find a building that looks good, just to place it down and then adjust the roads to fit the building rather than the other way around. I think it's better just generally to have the roads down first to make sure you stick to kind of a natural layout. But you have to compromise on that sometimes. That's okay. This is a block here that I spent a lot of time sort of placing down buildings, deleting all of them, placing down more buildings, and it took a while for me to sort of get something I was happy with. I try to take care not to reuse a lot of the same buildings, at least not the most distinctive ones. You'll see this corner building that I have right here. I placed it down on the street on the waterfront, so I was kind of wary of using it again, but I figured it was far enough away that it wouldn't really be that much of a problem. I also went down and after I had a lot of buildings placed down, I did some more detail work with placing down trees on the streets and also filling in the tram way with these cobbles, using procedural objects to get that effect. And yeah, I mean, these blocks of buildings are all pretty similar in terms of my process for creating them, but they all are also kind of unique. And that sort of creates, I mean, that's what a city is made of. It's sort of a bunch of different parts that are all kind of similar, but when you look at it as a whole, it kind of all becomes one cohesive thing, which is pretty cool. This is a pretty important intersection, I think, in the sort of grand scheme of things, so I took some time to detail it up with the bike lanes and adding some different colored pavement for the tramway. This kind of is like a major boulevard, I'm thinking, that'll kind of extend further into the city, and then it kind of splits into two one-way roads in the older part of the town. Yeah, we'll sort of figure out as we go what exactly this area will look like, but I need to find a really narrow building, kind of like the like Flatiron building in New York type thing, to place on this road split, because I think that would look really cool and form sort of a cool focal point for this particular area. Yeah, the intersection marking tool is definitely one of the best mods out there. It's absolutely crucial for me to create some of these things. Yeah, I really enjoy putting down these fillers and stuff. I just think that adds so much to the city. As I mentioned earlier, procedural objects is super useful for creating buildings that fit into these corner areas. I've talked about this in previous episodes, but I use a similar technique here. It's good to find buildings like this that kind of have sort of a smoother texture, at least on the front, so they don't get distorted a ton when you sort of play around with these different vertices with PO. I try to find buildings on the workshop that have kind of unusual corner degree setting type things, but it's also easier sometimes to just use a basic one and modify it like this. Yeah, using different techniques like that just kind of also helps to create some variety, and yeah, it's something that I've found is really useful. Another thing I did with some of these kind of awkward areas is add some walls with kind of like patio type areas in the back of these buildings. You see a lot of these in European cities. These would be I can imagine these would be really cool areas to hang out in, kind of secluded from the rest of the city, but still right in the middle of everything. I didn't spend a ton of time with props or anything, just kind of placed down a few trees to add some shade, but yeah, areas like that kind of are what make a city look really cool, I think. I went back sort of through this kind of waterfront plaza type area, placed down a couple of decals on the roads. This is kind of a more visible area, so I wanted to focus a little more on adding some more texture to it. These UK road decals are nice. They're super versatile, and I used a couple of different ones, kind of splicing them together in different patterns to create more of a sort of worn street for this area, because I figured there'd be a lot of cars moving around on it, so I figured that was important to do. One thing, this is a little bit different than a lot of the other buildings I've placed down. I figured this area right by the waterfront would be kind of sort of maybe some like reclaimed land, or it was formerly industrial or something, but I sort of imagine this is like a new kind of more modern development. And I found these buildings on the workshop. They're like a European modern wall-to-wall pack. And yeah, I think these are super cool, and I sort of spliced a bunch of them together to create this big development. Yeah, kind of adjust, again, move it to adjust these roads as I go to kind of fit with the buildings and create a more seamless look. you're still watching the video and you're enjoying it, I'd really appreciate if you gave a like to the video and subscribe to the channel. It means a lot to me, and you'll get a chance to follow with the city as it continues to sort of grow and come to life. After I put down the more modern buildings near the water, I went back and filled out a couple more of these blocks with sort of the similar style that I've been using before. This particular block was a really awkward shape that I can't really complain. I made it for myself, but it took a little bit of time to find buildings that would fit. These like Paris corner buildings are really useful because they're narrower than a single 8-meter wide tile, so they're a little bit more flexible in terms of how you use them. And I spliced together a couple of them in these different kind of awkward corner shapes to create this kind of block with sort of 3 different paths kind of running through it. And split this sort of awkward triangle shape into 3 different smaller blocks, each of which looks pretty organic. Again, just filling in this area with different styles of architecture gets kind of that like just general European look that I'm going for, at least with this old city. And yeah, this whole area is all sort of really coming together. I'm really happy with how it looks. And this kind of sort of painstaking process is how that happens. And yeah, I appreciate everyone for watching, and at the end of the video, I'll have some really cool cinematic shots of the city. I unpaused the simulation for some of them, so you can see what it actually looks like when people are walking around and stuff, which again is another thing that adds a lot of life to a city in this game. So yeah, thanks for watching again, and hopefully I'll see you in the next video.